The ion storm announced itself the way all terrible things do, by ruining my lunch. One moment I was sitting in my shelter, heating a packet of stew that claimed to contain real vegetables, which was bold marketing on a planet where nothing green survived 10 seconds outdoors. The next moment the atmospheric warning sirens wailed, and the sky outside dimmed as if someone had dropped a cosmic blanket over the world. The ground trembled, dust spiraled upward in frantic little cyclones, and the static charge built so fast that my hair stood up like a terrified hedgehog. I muttered something heroic like, "Oh no, 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 not today," and slapped the emergency lockdown sequence on my console. The shelter's reinforced panels snapped shut, the air filters roared to life, and I resigned myself to spending the next 8 hours playing cards against myself, which was humiliating because I had a long history of losing. I had just sat back down when something slammed into the outer hatch hard enough to rattle my bones. At first I assumed it was storm debris, a loose survey drone or an unlucky animal. But then came a second impact, followed by a muffled yell that did not sound like any creature native to this planet. The yelling had an accent, and vocabulary, and a tone that suggested whoever was out there was reconsidering several major life decisions. Against my better judgment, and definitely not because I am a soft-hearted idiot, I pulled up the exterior cam feed. The screen filled with static, then cleared just enough to show a humanoid figure staggering through the sizzling haze of ionized dust. Her silhouette flickered like a glitching hologram. I saw long limbs, a slim frame wrapped in some kind of metallic fabric, and at the top of her head, protruding through wind-tossed hair, 2 elongated ears tapering to elegant, sharp tips. Not human. Not even close. "So that's new," I whispered. She slammed into the hatch again, this time with both hands, shouting something that translated easily into, "Open the door before I die, you menace." That seemed universal enough. I hesitated only long enough to wonder whether opening the hatch for a strange alien woman during an ion storm made me a hero or an idiot, then decided it was probably both and disengaged the lock. The door cracked open, and the storm roared in like it was personally offended. The alien woman stumbled inside, drenched in crackling blue static, and I slammed the hatch behind her before the storm could decide to move in as well. She leaned back against the metal, chest rising and falling rapidly, eyes squeezed shut as if she were bracing for impact, and then she looked directly at me. She froze. As in, completely, utterly, statuesquely froze. Her luminous eyes widened, her long ears went rigid, and all the color drained from her face. For a moment I wondered if the storm had turned her to stone after all. Then she whispered, horrified, "A human." I wasn't thrilled by her tone. Well, I used to be. Some mornings I still am. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me as if I were some kind of dangerous cryptid that parental warnings were based on. I raised my hands slowly, palms out. "Hey. No need to panic. You're safe in here." Her gaze snapped toward the sealed door, then back to me. Her breathing quickened. "The record said you were extinct." "Wow," I muttered. "Rude." She blinked rapidly, shook her head, and pressed both palms to her face as if trying to reboot herself. "This cannot be happening. I just needed shelter. I did not expect this." "Don't worry," I said, trying for reassuring but probably landing somewhere in the neighborhood of awkward. "I'm harmless." "You're a human," she countered flatly, as if that settled the matter. "What's that supposed to mean?" She gestured at me broadly. "You improvise things until they explode. You build habitats out of scrap metal and then live in them. You eat dehydrated powders that look like industrial lubricant. You—" "That's a stereotype," I said, deeply offended. "I'll have you know this particular habitat only explodes on the days ending in, never mind. You're alive, aren't you? You're welcome." She inhaled through her nose, then exhaled slowly. "Apologies. I do not mean disrespect. I simply did not expect to meet your kind. Not like this. Not during a storm. Not while my ship is half fried and probably laughing at me." "That's fair," I said. "We're both having a day." She took another breath, this time steadier, and straightened up. Her metallic suit caught the dim shelter lights, shimmering in iridescent blues and silvers. She shook out her hair, dislodging particles of ion-charged dust that floated like tiny sparks before dissolving. She was tall, maybe a head taller than me, with long, graceful limbs and an almost ethereal face. If not for the ears, she could have passed for human. Well, a human who won a genetic lottery rigged by artists. The shelter vibrated as another shockwave hit, drawing her attention. She flinched, then hugged her arms around herself. "Storm's getting worse," I said. "You'll want to sit down." She eyed the cramped shelter interior like she expected it to bite her. "Is it safe?" "Safer than outside," I promised. "Inside, you only risk boredom. And possibly my cooking." She shuddered. "I fear nothing more than your cooking." "Wow. You really lean into the stereotypes, don't you?" Ignoring me, she moved to the central bench and perched on the farthest possible edge from where I stood, as if proximity increased the risk of spontaneous combustion. I gave her space and busied myself with the vent filters, mostly so she wouldn't see me glancing at her ears because, let's be honest, they looked like something from a fantasy epic carved by a very committed artisan. "Do you have a name?" I asked once I'd run out of things to pretend to adjust. She hesitated, then said, "Lyrian." "Nice. I'm Rafe." She nodded stiffly, then winced as the storm howled overhead. The lights flickered. She pulled a small handheld device from her belt and tapped its cracked screen. It made a pathetic electronic groan. "Your scanner okay?" I asked. "It is performing like a sulking child," she said darkly. "The readings are corrupted, the circuits overloaded, and I believe it is judging me." "Technology does that around me too," I said. "We're building rapport already." Her lips twitched, the faintest hint of amusement. "A breakthrough, maybe." "What were you doing out there?" I asked. "Research," she said. "Atmospheric analysis. My navigation system miscalculated." "Miscalculated." She scowled up at the ceiling. "Betrayed me." Ah. The classic, "it wasn't pilot error," defense. She glared at me, then sighed. "Fine. I might have ignored 1 or 2 warnings. And perhaps 3 advisory messages. But in my defense, storms on this planet are notoriously unpredictable." "Well," I said, "at least you chose an excellent shelter to crash into." She looked around the cramped metal room with deep skepticism. "It is functional." That's high praise coming from someone who probably lives in a floating palace made of stardust. "It is not made of stardust," she huffed. "It is composed of a titanium alloy composite optimized for." I was joking. "Oh." She blinked. "Humor. I am still adjusting." "That's okay. You'll get used to it. I'm basically a professional at saying things that confuse people." She stared at me again, less fear this time, more curiosity. Maybe even the beginnings of trust. Maybe. Outside, the storm raged harder, the panels vibrating under the assault. The shelter's internal temperature dipped before stabilizing again. I grabbed 2 ration packets, tossed one to her, and she caught it with neat, fluid precision. She inspected it like it was a suspicious artifact. "This is food." "In a way," I said. "But hey, it has texture. Sometimes." She sniffed it, grimaced, then reluctantly opened it. "If I perish," she murmured, "tell my people it was the human cuisine that felled me." "No promises," I said. "I'll tell them you bravely sacrificed yourself to protect me from a collapse in the structural integrity field." She froze mid-bite. "Is the structural integrity field compromised?" "No," I said. "But it got you to eat it." She looked at me, then, unexpectedly, laughed. The sound was light, delicate, and startlingly musical. And in that cramped shelter, with the storm clawing at the walls and the universe trying to shake us off this planet like dust, it felt good, warm, human, even if one of us wasn't. For the first time since she stumbled inside, I felt the tension in the room loosen, settling into something not quite comfortable but no longer brittle. The storm roared, the lights dimmed, and she took another small bite of the ration, wincing like she was bracing for battle. "This is terrible," she said. "Yeah," I admitted. "But you're getting used to it." She glanced at me, her expression softening. "Perhaps. I am." We sat there as the ion storm screamed outside, two strangers trapped together by cosmic chaos, one human, one long-eared alien researcher, and for the first time, I wondered if the storm was less a disaster and more an introduction the universe had orchestrated with dramatic flair. The storm grew louder, deepening into a kind of cosmic drumming that seemed determined to shake the screws out of my shelter one by one. Lyrian watched the ceiling like it might collapse at any moment, which, to be fair, was a possibility I tried not to think about on normal days. Today I had company, which meant I had to pretend the shelter was much more reliable than it actually was. She sat stiffly on the bench, long ears angled upward with tension, twitching each time the wind changed pitch. I wasn't sure if the twitching was a natural reflex or her version of screaming internally. The lights flickered again, casting the room into momentary darkness. Lyrian inhaled sharply. I tapped the nearest wall panel gently, as if encouraging it. "Don't worry, that's just the shelter saying hello." "It seems hostile," she replied. "That's its love language." She gave me a look suggesting she doubted both my shelter's affection and my mental stability. Before she could respond, the storm released a deep rumble that made the floor shiver. Lyrian shot to her feet, nearly knocking over my tool container. "That was too close," she said, pacing. "The ionic density is rising. If it continues to intensify, the outer shell of this structure might, how do your people say it, pop like a balloon." "That's optimistic," I said. "It usually only pops like a balloon if the storm reaches 10.3 on the Brantfield scale." "And what level is this storm?" "Somewhere between 9.9 and catastrophic." She stared at me with open disbelief. "You remain inside?" "Voluntarily." "Well, I didn't schedule the storm. I was having lunch." "Lunch is not a valid excuse for complacency." Spoken like someone who's never had dehydrated vegetable stew. She actually paused at that, considering it, then muttered, "I have now." Her pacing only got faster, and I could practically hear her thoughts sprinting in circles. I lifted a hand. "Lyrian, breathe. You're safe in here." "That is debatable." "Debatable in a comforting way. That is not how debate works." She finally stopped pacing and rubbed her temples as if trying to massage calm into her brain. The small scanner on her belt beeped pitifully again. She glared at it. "If you malfunction one more time, I will dismantle you into decorative sand." "That's a little harsh," I said. "It's just scared." "Machines do not feel fear. My toaster feels fear." She gave me the same look she'd given the ration packet earlier, one mixing horror, pity, and fascination. "I am beginning to understand why the universe considers humans dangerous." "We're creative," I corrected. "Unsupervised creativity is dangerous," she insisted. I grinned. "Exactly." She threw her hands up and sat back down, muttering in her native language, which, even without translation, sounded like an eloquent list of complaints directed at the cosmos. Another thunderous wave of ion energy slammed into the shelter, and she jumped again. I sat beside her, careful to leave a polite distance so she wouldn't suspect I was trying to get myself vaporized by touching an alien without permission. After a long silence, she asked quietly, "Is it always this violent on this planet?" "Well," I said, "sometimes the storms are worse." She groaned and buried her face in her hands. "I should have stayed on the research vessel. At least there, if I died, it would have been in a controlled environment." "Hey," I said. "Look on the bright side. If you die here, at least it'll be dramatic." "That is not comforting." "It would be memorable." "That is worse." I shrugged. "Well, good news is, you're not going to die. Not today. The shelter can handle this." "The shelter is shaking," she pointed out. "So am I, sometimes. Doesn't mean I'm going to explode." She looked at me, then slowly, almost reluctantly, laughed. This time it wasn't light and chime-like. It was small, restrained, like she was embarrassed to find something funny in the middle of her panic. But it was still a laugh, and it loosened the tension in her shoulders. "Your sense of humor is unusual," she said. "Highly sophisticated, you mean?" "No," she said, "I do not." "Well, I'm glad we've established trust." "We have not." "Progress." She shifted slightly, sitting more comfortably. "Your shelter. How long have you lived in it?" 2 years. 2 years? Inside this? "It's home," I said proudly, patting a panel. The panel made a worrying clank, and I pretended not to hear it. Lyrian definitely heard it. "You lived here alone for 2 years?" she asked, frowning. "Yep. No crew, no companions, no pets. I tried adopting a local critter once. It tried to eat my boots," I said. "Boots won. Barely." She blinked several times. "Humans willingly live like this?" "Well, not all of us. I'm just the sort who enjoys solitude. And bad storms. And ration stew." "You choose this," she said, trying to make sense of it. "Kind of. Life sends you down weird paths sometimes." She fell quiet, her gaze turning distant. Her ears drooped slightly, not dramatically, but enough to tell me she was thinking about something less amusing than my questionable life choices. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I was not supposed to be alone," she said. I waited. Silence pressed around us, but she continued, slow and reluctant, like revealing too much might break her. "My team was studying the atmospheric layers from orbit. I was assigned a solo descent because I insisted on verifying a strange magnetic distortion we detected. The others warned me it was too unstable, but I convinced myself," she hesitated, "convinced myself I knew better." "You're a scientist," I said gently. "We do stupid things for data." Her ears flicked upward. "You are a scientist?" "Well, sort of. I'm what we call a field technician, which is another way of saying I fix things until they stop breaking or I do." She considered me, then nodded. "Yes, that makes sense." I feel like that wasn't a compliment. It was neutral. Lightning-like arcs streaked across the storm outside, visible through the narrow viewport. Blue-white light backlit her silhouette, giving her an otherworldly glow. She drew her legs up a little, resting her arms atop them, posture curling inward. "You know," I said softly, "for what it's worth, you made the right call coming here. Storm would have atomized you out there." She gave a small nod, still watching the viewport. "I am aware. Thank you for opening the door." I smiled. "Of course. Wouldn't have felt right leaving you out there." She turned to me, eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Why? What do you mean, why?" "You did not know me. I could have been dangerous. You were being electrocuted by the sky. Kind of lowered your threat level." Her ears twitched. "You take too many risks." "Or," I said, "I have a good instinct for people." "That," she muttered, "is statistically improbable." I laughed. "Then maybe you're the exception." She blinked at that, puzzled. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The storm groaned above us, but inside the shelter, the silence was gentle now, not tense, not fearful. Just quiet. Then the lights flickered again, and my console beeped. Lyrian tensed instantly. "Is that bad?" she asked. "Probably not," I said. "Probably." "Well," I said with a shrug, "the power regulator might be overloading, and if that happens, the air recycler will shut off, and if that happens we'll run out of breathable air, but only after." "Stop," she said sharply. "You are not helping." I grinned. "Want to help me fix it?" She stared at me. "I am a xenophysicist." "That's perfect. This is definitely physics adjacent. It is a maintenance panel." "Same thing." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "I cannot believe I am assisting with this. Welcome to human engineering." Together we knelt beside the console. I handed her tools. She inspected each like it was a religious relic, then sighed and used them anyway. Our shoulders occasionally brushed as we worked, and each time, she pretended not to notice while also very obviously noticing. It took 10 minutes to stabilize the panel. When we finished, she leaned back, exhaling slowly. That was oddly satisfying. I raised an eyebrow. See, human engineering grows on you. It is chaotic, she said, and disorganized. But functional. Barely, she muttered. I chuckled. You're adapting. She hesitated, then allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps a little. The storm roared again, but somehow it felt more distant now. Less like a threat and more like background noise to something quietly unfolding between us. Strange, unexpected, and a little fragile. We sat side by side on the floor, the dim lights casting long shadows, and for the first time since she'd crashed through my door, Lyrian wasn't tense, wasn't pacing, wasn't treating me like a mythical horror. She just sat there, calmer, warmer, almost comfortable. And I realized that the storm outside wasn't the only thing shifting. The storm reached a pitch so deep it felt like the planet itself was humming. The walls vibrated in slow, uneven tremors, like a creature with an irregular heartbeat. Lyrian's ears tracked every sound, every boom, every shift in pressure, every flicker of the lights, and I could almost see her calculating the structural integrity of the shelter based on those noises alone. If she came to any alarming conclusions, she kept them to herself, which I took as a sign of either growing trust or deep resignation. She sat cross-legged on the floor, the scanner in her lap. It had given up the will to function several minutes ago, indicated by its screen going black and then displaying a single unhappy pixel. She poked it gently. It blinked twice like it was reconsidering consciousness and then died again. I despise this device, she announced. You're talking to it, I pointed out. I am expressing disdain. That's how all human relationships with technology begin. She gave me a flat look. You have very dysfunctional relationships with your devices. Yes, I said, but they're loyal. Except the water purifier. That thing betrays me hourly. Her ears lifted slightly, the alien equivalent of raising an eyebrow. Your purifier has rebelled? I wouldn't call it a rebellion. More like consistent sabotage. It is a machine. Machines cannot. Don't say they can't feel, I warned. They know when you say that. Her mouth fell open in disbelief just as the shelter lights dimmed again, pulsing like the heartbeat of a nervous animal. She flinched at the flicker, then turned a slow, accusing stare at me. Explain, she said. I lifted both hands. I didn't do anything. You touched something. No, I didn't. You thought about touching something. Okay, that one I can't deny. She sighed and pressed her palms together, as if praying for patience from whatever cosmic entity handled requests from stranded scientists dealing with humans. Outside, the storm wailed, a long, metallic shriek of charged particles grinding against the planet's magnetic field. It reminded me of the cry of a massive creature in pain, which was not reassuring in the slightest. The shelter groaned in response. Lyrian looked up sharply. That was not a normal sound. No storm is normal, I said casually. She stared. Does that comfort you? Not really, I said. But acknowledging it helps my nerves. Your nerves appear very calm. My nerves died the day I moved here. She blinked twice, uncertain whether I was joking. To be honest, sometimes I wasn't sure either. Another tremor shook the floor, and the two of us lurched sideways. I grabbed the nearest stable object, an unfortunate crate full of malfunctioning heat coils, and Lyrian grabbed my arm. Not lightly. More like a combat-trained reaction, her fingers locking around my sleeve with surprising strength. There was a brief moment where our eyes met, and she slowly realized she was clinging to me for dear life. She quickly released me, clearing her throat with the stiff dignity of someone pretending they definitely did not do the thing they just did. A reflex. Nothing more. Totally, I said, nodding. Pure professional reflex. Very composed. Her ears flushed with color. Do not mock me. I would never, I said mockingly. She huffed and turned her attention back to her broken scanner, muttering something about unpredictable primitives. The shelter trembled again, this time not from the storm, but from the ancient power regulator, which gave a low, ominous whine that made my stomach drop. That, I said, we need to fix. Lyrian's eyes widened in alarm. That sound was wrong. Very wrong. Catastrophically wrong. How long has this occurred? Oh, usually only during the most intense storms. Rafe, her ears angled sharply upward, her version of yelling. We should have addressed this immediately. Well, you were panicking, I said. And I was trying to maintain a calm and supportive environment. I was not panicking. You were pacing in a circle and muttering about death probabilities. That was analysis, she insisted. Sure. She pinched the bridge of her nose again. Fine. Show me the regulator. I guided her to the maintenance panel in the back corner of the shelter. The moment we knelt in front of it, the noise grew louder, a mechanical groan mixed with faint sizzling. Lyrian froze. Sizzling is never a good sign. I shrugged. Sometimes it's just the thermal converter struggling. Struggling not to explode? Struggling to regulate the output. Slight difference. She shot me a look that implied she was adding this to her growing list of reasons humans should not be allowed near machinery. We opened the panel. Inside, sparks crackled along a frayed wire, and 2 circuits glowed with a concerning shade of orange. Lyrian recoiled. That is not stable. That's debatable. No, she snapped. It is not. It is the opposite of stable. It is the precursor to structural combustion. So, unstable? Extremely. Got it. She rolled her eyes with an elegance that suggested she'd practiced on other infuriating people. Taking the toolkit, she began arranging tools with a level of precision that made my haphazard organization look like artistic chaos. Hand me the flux stabilizer, she said. I passed her a screwdriver. She stared at it, then at me. This is not a flux stabilizer. To be fair, I said, names are flexible. Science is not flexible. Science with humans is. Why? Because things keep breaking. She inhaled through her nose, exhaled through her mouth, and muttered, I am working with a madman. But she fixed the regulator. Not quickly, mostly because she insisted I explain the bizarre human modifications I had made to the original design. Some of those explanations were impressive. Some were questionable. One made her momentarily put her head in her hands. Still, she rewired the circuits, realigned the thermal converter, and used a delicate tool from her belt to repair the frayed wire. When she finally closed the panel, she sat back with a proud, satisfied sigh. There, she said. It will hold. Nice, I said. You're a natural at fixing human disasters. It required more patience than I thought I possessed, she replied. But it was not unpleasant. High praise, I said. She gave me a sideways glance. Do not push your luck. We returned to the center of the shelter. The storm outside was still violent, but it had settled into a rhythm, loud but steady, wild but predictable. Something like a cosmic drumbeat. Lyrian rubbed her hands together slowly, probably more from nerves than cold. The worst should pass soon, she said, sounding like she was trying to convince herself. Storm's exhausting itself, I agreed. Won't be long before it downgrades. Downgrades? Yeah. Goes from angry planetary tantrum to aggressive weather report. She tilted her head. Human classifications are strange, says the woman whose species classifies cloud formations by flavor. That is not, she stopped. Okay, yes, that one is a little strange. A small laugh escaped her, then she covered her mouth like she didn't intend for it to happen. You're getting used to me, I said. Do not be absurd. You laughed. It was involuntary. It was charming. She froze. Her ears, previously relaxed, abruptly lifted and then slowly, very slowly, lowered again. She looked away, fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. Outside, the storm rumbled one last, tired growl. Inside, the air felt warmer. Not physically, just in that subtle way shared danger and awkward flirting sometimes warm things. She cleared her throat. Your kind is different from what our record said. Good different? I asked. She hesitated. This silence was not the fearful kind. It was thoughtful, heavy in a delicate way. Finally she said, different in ways I did not expect. I leaned back against the wall. I'll take that. She looked at me, really looked, and this time there was no suspicion, no panic, no bracing for danger. Just curiosity. And something softer behind it. I still think it was unwise to open the door, she said. And yet, I replied, here we are. Her lips curved gently. Here we are. The storm outside had begun to break, the booming easing into distant echoes. The lights stabilized. The shelter stopped trembling. But something else, something between us, seemed to be just beginning. The ion storm waned to a distant growl beyond the mountains, but neither of us dared to mention it until the shelter scanners finally stopped screaming. The console lights softened from violent red to a sheepish amber, as if the equipment itself was apologizing for the earlier panic. I stood near the entry hatch, pretending I knew how to read half the alien diagnostics she'd patched into my system, while she paced in tight circles, her long ears flicking with every anxious step. I'd learned by then that her ears acted like emotional antennas, though she insisted they were purely aesthetic evolutionary anomalies, which was probably alien speak for I don't want to talk about it. I think the worst is over, I said, tapping the console like someone who definitely had not broken 3 consoles in his lifetime with that same gesture. She didn't stop pacing. Think. Humans rely on thinking far too much. The data core says the ion concentration is decreasing by only, she squinted, 9%. That's practically a victory parade in my culture. In your culture, you run toward explosions. Only the interesting ones. Her ear twitched again, but this time it looked suspiciously like she was trying not to smile. She sat down on one of the storage crates, my last remaining crate not repurposed as part of her makeshift tech array, and exhaled. The air between us felt lighter, but not empty. Something unspoken hovered there, faint but persistent. We should check the exterior antenna, she finally said. If the storm fried your communication system, you'll remain stranded. I pointed at myself. Correction, we'll remain stranded. She blinked as if I'd spoken an unexpected equation. I assumed you would want me to leave as soon as travel is safe. Well, I said, trying to look casual while my stomach twisted itself into interpretive knots. It's not like most people get surprise visits from storm-fleeing alien scientists with dramatic ears. I'm still processing the excitement. I told you not to mention the ears. I didn't mention them. I observed them. Observation is a scientific discipline. She muttered something in her language, probably a threat involving my eyebrows, and rose again, stretching her limbs after hours cramped indoors. The movement was fluid, controlled, elegant in ways I couldn't describe without sounding like a poet who'd swallowed a thesaurus. She went to the hatch, ran her hand along the scanner, then hesitated. If the atmosphere is still too volatile, stepping outside would be reckless. Great, I said. I specialize in reckless. Her gaze held mine a long moment. I am aware. We stepped out together, the air shimmering faintly with residual electric charge. Pale shards of ion dust floated lazily, drifting like the galaxy's idea of snow. I reached out and caught one. It evaporated on contact, leaving a tingling sensation up my arm. That is mildly toxic, she said. Oh, good. We made our way toward the antenna tower. Well, what remained of it? The upper third had twisted into a shape reminiscent of a pretzel having a nervous breakdown. She clucked her tongue. This is not reparable. Sure it is, I said. Anything's fixable with enough stubbornness and adhesive. Is that another human proverb? No, but it should be. Her fingers traced along the ruined metal, her ears lowering in thought. If I reroute the base module and amplify the signal through your shelter's power loop, we could broadcast a long-distance distress wave. Great. That means someone will pick us up. She didn't respond. Someone friendly, I added. Still nothing. I cleared my throat. Unless you're worried your people might not be thrilled you spent a storm hiding with a human. Her ears twitched again, a nervous stutter this time. My people do not object to humans. They simply have certain expectations regarding protocol, and boundaries, and scientific objectivity. So you hanging out with me for days would violate all of those? Her silence was answer enough. We returned to the shelter, her steps faster than before, and she plunged immediately into rewiring the system. Sparks jumped. Panels rattled. At one point she told me to hand her a microconverter, and I handed her a spoon by accident. She stared at it like I'd delivered a philosophical puzzle. Why, she asked slowly, would this help? You never know, I said. Humans are adaptable. I fear that adaptability is contagious. Her tone was meant as criticism, but she was smiling again, really smiling this time, without trying to hide it behind annoyance or sarcasm. Night fell. The storm glow dimmed beyond the horizon. The shelter hummed with new power pathways she'd woven through it like silver veins. When she activated the broadcast, the whole structure vibrated with a deep, resonant thrum that made my teeth itch. It will take time for the signal to reach a relay ship, she said. Hours. Possibly a full day. So, I said, we wait. She sat across from me, legs folded neatly, posture impossibly proper for someone who just crawled around in wires. Her gaze drifted over the cramped shelter, the bunks, the emergency rations, the stack of boards I'd meant to turn into furniture someday but instead used as a coffee table. When I first entered this place, she said softly, I feared you. Yeah. The screaming and pointing kind of gave that away. I did not scream. You made a noise that could have scared off a meteor. Her laugh was soft, unexpected, and disarming. She shook her head. My fear was irrational. Humans are not dangerous. Thank you, I said. Most people win awards for that kind of compliment. Her eyes met mine. You proved that my assumptions were flawed. You are, she hesitated, searching for a word. Surprisingly gentle. That is definitely not an award-winning compliment, I said, but I felt warmth bloom in my chest all the same. Hours passed. We shared food, stories, awkward jokes that somehow became less awkward. Every so often she'd look at the door as if expecting her ship to appear instantly, then relax again. When she grew tired, she shifted closer, not touching, just near enough that I could feel her warmth. Her ears drooped slightly, the way they did when she was comfortable, or when she forgot to be alert. Human, she murmured. Yes. If my people respond first, I may have to leave immediately. I nodded, even though the motion felt like swallowing a sun. I figured. But, she added quietly, if your people respond first, I will stay until they arrive. Your species' evacuation procedures are notoriously slow. And by slow, I said, you mean dignified and cautious. No, she said, curling one ear with amusement. I mean slow. I laughed, and she leaned subtly into the sound, as if laughter itself warmed the air around her. The comm console beeped once, only once, but enough to spike my heart. She snapped upright. A relay response. It will decode shortly. Whose is it? I whispered. She didn't answer. She just watched the display as symbols flickered across it, her face tightening with every shift in pattern. My pulse beat in my throat. I didn't know what I was hoping for anymore, rescue or delay. Finally the screen stabilized, glowing with a message neither of us could misinterpret. Her people had responded. Slowly, she exhaled. Her shoulders lowered, her ears drawing inward slightly, not in fear, something closer to reluctance. I must go when they arrive, she said. But I would like to return someday. A breath I didn't know I'd held shuddered out of me. I'd like that. Good, she whispered. We sat together in the hushed shelter, waiting for the ship that would take her away. Not clinging, not pleading, just two beings from different worlds who'd weathered a storm together and discovered something neither had expected. Outside, the last ion dust settled on the ground like fading stars, and inside, she reached out, hesitant, deliberate, and let her hand rest lightly over mine. Her people would land soon. But for that moment, she stayed.